It started like most stories in families like mine, quietly with obligations dressed up as love and guilt passed around like family recipes. My name is Isla, and for the longest time I was the unpaid, invisible third parent in a household that never saw me as anything more than a convenience. My older sister Monica had 3 kids under the age of 6, and every time she so much as sneezed or had a date night planned, the phone rang, and it was always my mother calling, not asking, but telling me to come help your sister. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. I never complained. Not when I missed college study sessions. Not when I canceled dates. Not when I had to change diapers at 3 a.m. while Monica slept off her wine. For them, I was just the girl with no life, no boundaries, no say. You don't pay rent here. Dad would snap if I so much as looked tired. This is your way of helping the family. But the breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. I had finally landed a paid internship, something I had worked for tirelessly, and I was expected to attend orientation. I was excited, hopeful even. But just as I was getting dressed, my mom banged on my door. Monica needs you. She's got a brunch date. I can't, I said cautiously. I have internship orientation. You're skipping that nonsense. This is your real responsibility. I stood my ground. For the first time, I said no. I expected anger, maybe guilt. What I didn't expect was for them to literally throw me out. My father opened the front door, tossed my duffel bag onto the porch, and said coldly, "Go figure out your life since you're too good for us now." That night, I slept at a friend's place. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stared at the ceiling and thought, how long had I been giving up my life for a family that would erase me over one no? How many weekends? How many hours had they stolen from me without a single thank you? And that's when the idea came to me. An idea not born out of revenge, but out of justice. If they treated me like an unpaid babysitter, then I was going to bill them like one. Maya's apartment smelled like lavender and fresh coffee. 2 things that had been absent from my life for so long I'd forgotten they existed. She'd cleared space on her couch for me without hesitation, brought me extra blankets, and most importantly, she listened without judgment when I explained what had happened. "Wait, let me get this straight," Maya said, settling into her armchair with a steaming mug. "Your parents literally threw you out because you prioritized your career orientation over free babysitting." That's the simplified version, but yes. And Monica? Where was she during this family crisis? I thought about Monica's reaction when Dad had thrown my bag out. She'd stood in the kitchen doorway in her silk robe, watching the whole scene unfold. Not a word of protest. Not even eye contact. Monica was getting ready for her brunch date. Maya stared at me for a long moment. "Your sister let your parents kick you out so she could go to brunch. Monica's got her own problems to worry about." "No, Isla. Monica's got solutions to her problems. You've been her solution for years." The truth of it hit harder than I'd expected. I wasn't Monica's sister in any practical sense. I was her unpaid employee. The one she called when she needed coverage, when she wanted freedom, when she couldn't be bothered to handle her own responsibilities. That first week at Maya's, I threw myself into the internship orientation with desperate focus. Caldwell and Associates was a small but prestigious architectural firm known for sustainable design and community-focused projects. The senior partners, Elena Caldwell and James Morrison, seemed genuinely invested in their interns' development. "What draws you to sustainable architecture?" Elena asked during my first one-on-one meeting. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up sketching building designs while rocking Monica's babies to sleep, dreaming of creating spaces that actually nurtured the people inside them. "I think buildings should serve the people who use them, not the other way around," I said. "I've spent too much time in places that drain me instead of supporting me." Elena studied me with keen interest. That's a mature perspective for someone your age. Most students focus on aesthetics or engineering challenges. If only she knew that my perspective came from years of being treated like furniture, present when needed, invisible when not. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I was learning CAD software, participating in client meetings, contributing to real projects that would actually improve people's lives. For the first time in years, I felt like my thoughts and opinions mattered. But the family drama was far from over. Monica called Tuesday morning while I was reviewing blueprints for a community center project. "Isla, this is getting ridiculous. You need to come home." "Good morning to you too, Monica. Don't be smart with me. Mom's been crying for 3 days. Dad's furious. The kids keep asking where Aunt Isla is. The kids have been asking where I am for a week. This is the first time you've called. I've been busy. Sophie's had a stomach bug, Tyler broke his arm at soccer, and Emma's been having nightmares again." The litany of crises was familiar, but this time I noticed something I'd missed before. Monica's assumption that these problems were inherently my responsibility too. "That sounds difficult. How are you managing?" "I'm not managing. That's why I need you to come home." "What about Sophie's father?" "Tyler's father?" "Emma's father." Monica paused. "What about them?" "Well, they're the kids' parents too. Surely they can help with their own children." "Brad's working. You know that." Brad, Monica's on and off boyfriend and father of her youngest two, worked construction. Important work, but not more important than Monica's interior design consulting job. Somehow, though, his work always took priority when childcare needs arose. And Sophie's father? Derek lives in another state. He's not exactly available for emergency babysitting. So you're saying that when you need childcare help, instead of hiring a professional or asking the children's fathers to step up, your first call is to your college-age sister? You make it sound so calculating. Isn't it? There was a long pause. I could hear Tyler whining in the background about something, probably wanting attention from his mother, who was on the phone trying to guilt her sister into providing free childcare. "Isla, we're family. Family helps each other." "What do you do for me, Monica?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what have you ever done for me? When was the last time you asked about my classes, my goals, my problems? When was the last time you offered to help me with anything?" That's not. You never said you needed help. Because every conversation we have is about your needs. There's never space for mine. That's not true. Really? Name one time in the past year that you've asked about my life that didn't relate to your convenience. The silence stretched between us. In the background, I could hear Emma starting to cry about something, probably needing her mother's attention that was currently focused on securing free labor. "Look, we can discuss this later," Monica said finally. "Right now I need to know if you can watch the kids this weekend. I have a big client presentation and—" "No." "What?" I said no. I can't watch your kids this weekend. "But what am I supposed to do?" "Figure it out. Hire a babysitter. Ask Brad to watch his own children. Call a family member who hasn't been exploited to the point of moving out. Isla, please. Just this once. Just this once." The phrase that had preceded at least 50 other emergency babysitting requests over the past 3 years. "Monica, I have plans this weekend." "What plans? You never have plans." The casual dismissal of my existence was breathtaking. "I have plans now. I'm building a life that doesn't revolve around your childcare needs." "You're being selfish." "I'm being an adult. You should try it." I hung up before she could respond. Maya found me that evening stress cleaning her already spotless kitchen, scrubbing counters with the kind of focused intensity that comes from redirected rage. Rough conversation with the family. Monica called demanding emergency babysitting for this weekend. When I said no, she called me selfish. For having your own plans. For existing independently of her convenience. Maya grabbed a dish towel and started drying the dishes I'd already washed twice. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." What would happen if you just stopped? If you never babysat for them again? I paused in my aggressive counter-scrubbing. I don't know. I guess they'd have to figure out alternative arrangements. Like hiring actual babysitters, or Brad taking responsibility for his own children. I suppose. So really, by always being available for free, you've been enabling them to avoid solving their actual childcare problems. The insight was uncomfortable but accurate. My availability had allowed Monica to avoid the difficult work of building sustainable support systems. She didn't need to budget for childcare, negotiate with Brad about parenting responsibilities, or develop relationships with reliable babysitters because she had me. I never thought about it that way. You've been their get-out-of-jail-free card for years. No wonder they're panicking now that you're not available. That weekend, while Monica was presumably scrambling to find childcare for her big client presentation, I did something revolutionary. I lived my own life. Maya and I went hiking at a state park an hour outside the city. We packed a lunch, brought our sketchbooks, and spent the day talking about architecture, design, and dreams for the future. It was the first weekend in 3 years that I hadn't spent managing someone else's children. How does it feel? Maya asked as we sat by a stream, sketching the way light filtered through the trees. Quiet, but good quiet, like I can finally hear my own thoughts. And what are your thoughts telling you? I set down my pencil and really considered the question, that I've been living a life that wasn't mine, that I've been so focused on being useful to other people that I forgot I was supposed to be living for myself too. What are you going to do about it? I don't know yet, but I know I can't go back to the way things were. Monday morning brought a text from my mother. Monica had to cancel her client meeting because she couldn't find a babysitter. I hope you're proud of yourself. The guilt hit like a physical blow, but underneath it was something new. Anger. I was being blamed for the consequences of setting a single boundary. After 3 years of never saying no, my first attempt at self-preservation was being framed as a family betrayal. I showed the text to Maya over lunch. Your mom's trying to make you feel responsible for Monica's poor planning, Maya observed. Maybe I am responsible. If I had just watched the kids this once. No. Stop. Monica's client meeting was her responsibility. Finding childcare for her kids is her responsibility. The only thing you're responsible for is your own life. But what if she loses the client? Then she loses the client. And maybe next time she'll plan better or ask Brad to step up or hire professional help. The only reason this is a crisis is because they've never had to develop backup plans. That evening, I started documenting everything. Not because I was planning anything specific, but because I needed to understand the scope of what I'd been giving away. I went through 3 years of text messages, emails, and calendar entries. Every emergency babysitting call, every last-minute request, every weekend lost to someone else's crisis. I created categories: planned childcare, emergency care, overnight stays, meal preparation, transportation, household cleaning, medical appointments. The patterns that emerged were staggering. I'd been providing an average of 35 hours per week of unpaid childcare and household labor. During busy periods, school breaks, Monica's work crises, family emergencies, it could be 50 to 60 hours per week. I'd essentially been working a full-time job while trying to maintain my studies, all for a family that saw my contributions as so natural and inevitable that they'd never once said thank you. Come on, Isla, Maya said, looking over my shoulder at the spreadsheet I'd created. This is like a part-time job. No, this is more than a part-time job. I know, and I never realized it because it happened gradually. A few hours here, an overnight there, until suddenly I was responsible for everything. What are you going to do with this information? I stared at the numbers on my screen. 147 separate instances of providing childcare over 3 years. 1,847 total hours. Countless meals prepared, diapers changed, homework supervised, bedtime stories read. I'm going to show them exactly what they've been taking for granted. The idea crystallized slowly over the next few days. If my family saw me as a service provider rather than a person, then I would treat the relationship like a business transaction. I would document the services I'd provided and bill them at fair market rates. It wasn't about the money. I knew they couldn't afford to pay what my work had been worth. It was about recognition, about forcing them to confront the value of what they'd been demanding for free. I researched professional childcare rates in our area. Babysitting averaged $19 per hour. Overnight care was $25 per hour. Specialized services like taking children to medical appointments or managing sick kids commanded $22 to $24 per hour. I applied these rates to my documented hours, added charges for meals prepared and transportation provided, and calculated the total cost of services rendered. $12,548.50. $12,548.50. That's what 3 years of my life had been worth in professional terms. Maya watched me format the invoice with a mixture of admiration and concern. Are you really going to send this? Yes. What do you think will happen? They'll be furious. They'll probably never speak to me again. And you're okay with that? I thought about the questions seriously. Maya, they're already not speaking to me unless they need something. At least this way, they'll understand exactly what they lost. I printed the invoice on high-quality paper, the kind we used for client presentations at the firm. Professional, serious, undeniable. I folded it carefully into a crisp white envelope and addressed it in my best handwriting. Walking to the mailbox felt like walking to the edge of a cliff. This wasn't just about money. This was about finally, after 3 years of silence, speaking my truth. As I dropped the envelope into the slot, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For 3 years, I'd swallowed every slight, every assumption that my time didn't matter, every instance of being taken for granted. This invoice was my voice, finally, after years of being mute. The reaction was swift and explosive. Day 1, missed call from Mom at 7 a.m. Day 2, 17 missed calls from Monica for increasingly angry texts. Day 3, Dad calling from the house phone, which he only used for emergencies. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to defend my decision yet. I needed to be sure I could stand behind it. Day 4, Monica showed up at the architectural firm. I was reviewing drainage plans for a community garden when our receptionist, Janet, approached my desk looking flustered. Isla, there's a woman in reception who says she's your sister. She seems upset. I could hear Monica's voice from the lobby, loud and agitated. My co-workers were starting to notice. James Morrison appeared at my cubicle. Family emergency? Family reckoning, I said. I'm sorry about the disruption. Can I use the conference room? Of course. Take whatever time you need. I found Monica pacing the lobby like a caged animal, clutching my invoice in her hands like evidence of a crime. Conference room, I said quietly, gesturing toward the glass-walled space. She followed me, practically vibrating with rage. The moment the door closed, the explosion began. What the hell is wrong with you? Sending us a bill? A bill, Isla. Like we're strangers. You've been treating me like hired help for 3 years. I'm just making it official. We're family. When it's convenient for you. Monica slammed the invoice down on the conference table. $12,000? For babysitting. For professional childcare services, meal preparation, transportation, household management, and emergency care. That's what you would have paid a stranger for the same services. But you're not a stranger. You're my sister. Exactly. I'm your sister. Which should mean you treat me better than a stranger, not worse. Monica stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Treat you worse? We gave you a home, food, everything you needed. You gave me those things in exchange for unlimited, unpaid labor. That's not family support. That's exploitation with room and board. Exploitation? Isla, you're being dramatic. Am I? Monica, when's the last time you asked about my life without needing something from me? The question hung in the air between us. Monica opened her mouth, then closed it. When's the last time you said please when asking me to babysit? When's the last time you said thank you? I don't need to say please and thank you for every little thing. We're family. Family should be more polite to each other, not less. Monica sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. I don't understand where this is coming from. You never complained before. I was afraid to complain. Every time I showed even slight reluctance, the guilt trip started. Family comes first. This is how you help. You don't pay rent here. Because it's true. Family does come first. Whose family, Monica? Because from where I'm sitting, only your family comes first. Your needs, your children, your convenience. When do my needs come first? When does my family, meaning me, matter? Monica was quiet for a moment, processing. What exactly do you want? I want recognition that what I've been providing has value. I want acknowledgement that my time and energy matter. I want an apology for 3 years of being taken for granted. And if we give you that, if we apologize, will you come back? The question revealed everything. Even now, even after being confronted with the scope of my contributions, Monica was primarily concerned with securing my continued availability. Monica, I'm not a service you can restore with an apology. I'm a person who needs to live her own life. But what about the kids? What about my work? What about emergencies? What about hiring actual babysitters? What about asking Brad to take responsibility for his own children? What about building sustainable support systems instead of relying on guilting your sister into free labor? Monica's face was getting redder. We can't afford professional childcare for everything. Then you can't afford to have 3 children and maintain your current lifestyle. That's a planning problem, not an Isla problem. You're really going to abandon your family over money? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm setting boundaries. And this was never about money. This was about respect. Monica stood up abruptly. I have to pick up the kids from school. Tyler has soccer practice. Sophie has a doctor's appointment. And Emma needs help with her science project. Even now, even in the middle of our confrontation, she was reciting her to-do list like it was somehow my responsibility to help manage it. Then you better get going, I said. Isla, please, just help me through this week. Things are crazy right now, and things are always crazy, Monica. That's what happens when you have 3 children and refuse to develop adequate support systems. I can't do it all myself. Then get help, professional help that you pay for. Monica stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. For the first time, she was seeing me as someone who might actually be unavailable to her. Fine, she said finally, but don't expect us to forgive you for this. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for recognition that I'm a person, not a resource. After Monica left, I sat in the conference room for 20 minutes, shaking. James Morrison knocked on the door. Everything all right? I think I just officially ended my relationship with my family. I'm sorry to hear that. Family relationships can be complicated. The thing is, I don't think what I just ended was actually a family relationship. I think it was an employment arrangement disguised as love. James was quiet for a moment. Sometimes the people who claim to love us the most are the ones who have the hardest time seeing us as separate individuals with our own needs. How do you know the difference between real love and whatever this was? Real love wants you to thrive, even when it's inconvenient. Real love celebrates your independence, not just your usefulness. That evening, Maya found me on her couch, staring at the ceiling. How did the family confrontation go? About as well as expected. Monica thinks I'm having a mental breakdown. Are you? I considered the question. Maybe. But if I am, it's the healthiest breakdown I've ever had. What happens now? Now I keep building a life that doesn't depend on their approval. The silence from my family was complete. No birthday calls, no holiday invitations, no updates about the kids. It was like I'd been erased from their lives entirely. But something interesting happened during those months of silence. I discovered who I was when I wasn't constantly managing other people's crises. The internship at Caldwell and Associates had turned into a part-time position, then a full-time offer after graduation. My work on sustainable community projects had caught the attention of a nonprofit organization, and I'd been invited to consult on several initiatives. I was learning things about myself I'd never had the chance to discover. I liked cooking elaborate meals for myself and friends. I enjoyed staying up late, reading without someone banging on my door at 6 a.m. I loved having people over without worrying about noise complaints or mess. Maya and I had developed a comfortable rhythm as roommates, sharing expenses and supporting each other's goals. She was applying to graduate school in social work, and I was saving money for my own place. "You seem different," Maya observed one evening as we worked on our respective projects at the kitchen table. "More settled in yourself." I feel like I'm finally figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to be what everyone else needs. And who is that? I thought about the question. Someone who cares about creating spaces that support people. Someone who believes work should be valued and compensated fairly. Someone who understands that helping others shouldn't require sacrificing yourself. A year after sending the invoice, I had saved enough money to consider buying my own place. The idea felt revolutionary. Owning a space that was entirely mine, decorated according to my preferences, used on my schedule. I was browsing real estate listings when I saw it. 1247 Maple Street. My childhood home was for sale. The listing was stark, motivated sellers. Must sell quickly. Some deferred maintenance. The photos showed a house that looked tired and worn. The beige shutters, I remembered, were faded and peeling. I called the listing agent out of curiosity. "Oh, that property," she said when I mentioned the address. "It's been on the market for 6 months. The owners are facing foreclosure. Job loss, I believe, plus some medical bills. They're asking $20,000 below market value." My heart stopped. Foreclosure? I'm afraid so. It's a shame. It's a solid house structurally, just needs cosmetic updating. I hung up and stared at the listing photos for a long time. My family was losing the house where I'd grown up, where I'd been treated like live-in help, where I'd been thrown out for finally saying no. An idea began forming. Not revenge, exactly. Justice, maybe. Or just the simple satisfaction of being able to buy back the place I'd been cast out of. I called my bank that afternoon. My credit was excellent, my employment stable, my savings substantial. The loan officer was enthusiastic about my application. "Based on your financial profile, you could easily qualify for this property. Would you like to make an offer?" "Yes, but I have one requirement. I want to keep my identity confidential during the purchase." "Of course. We can structure it through an LLC or use your attorney as intermediary. Is there a particular reason for the confidentiality?" "Family reasons." "I understand. We see that occasionally." The purchase process moved quickly. The sellers, my parents, accepted my offer within 48 hours. They were clearly desperate to avoid foreclosure. My attorney handled all communications. As far as my parents knew, they were selling to Chen, my middle name and Maya's surname combined. The day of closing, I sat in my attorney's office signing papers and felt a strange sense of completion. Not revenge, exactly. Just the quiet satisfaction of having rebuilt my life to the point where I could purchase the home I'd been thrown out of. "Congratulations!" my attorney said as I signed the final document. You're now the owner of 1247 Maple Street. Thank you. What are your plans for the property? I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. I'm going to turn it into something useful, something that actually serves the community. The house was mine, but I didn't move in immediately. Instead, I spent the next month planning renovations. I'd been working on community development projects at Caldwell & Associates, and I had an idea for how to put the house to good use. I decided to turn my childhood home into a drop-in childcare center for working mothers who needed reliable, professional care but couldn't afford traditional daycare rates. Maya was fascinated by the symmetry. You're turning the place where you provided unpaid childcare into a place where people get paid fairly for childcare. Exactly. I want to create a model of how childcare should work, professional caregivers earning fair wages, parents paying reasonable rates for quality services. I hired contractors to begin renovations. The living room would become a bright play area with educational materials. The kitchen would be updated to meet commercial standards. My old bedroom would become an office for administrative work. 3 weeks into renovations, someone knocked on the door. I was meeting with the contractor about playground equipment when I heard voices on the porch. Through the window, I could see 3 figures, my mother, my father, and a small child. My parents, with Monica's youngest, Sophie. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Hi, Mom. The transformation of her face was remarkable. Confusion melted into recognition, then shock, then something that might have been fear. Isla, what are you? We were told the new owner was moving in. We hoped we could speak to them about... She trailed off as understanding dawned. You bought the house. I did. Dad stepped forward, holding Sophie on his hip. The little girl was 4 now. Probably didn't remember me, clearly. Isla, we didn't know you had this kind of money. I didn't 2 years ago. How did you? Mom's voice was faint. I worked. I saved. I built a career instead of spending my time providing unpaid labor. They stood there on the porch, my porch now, looking lost and older than I remembered. Could we come in? Mom asked hesitantly. To talk. This is my home now. You're welcome to visit, but not to stay. I led them into the living room, though it was currently filled with construction materials and renovation plans. Sophie immediately gravitated toward a pile of colorful fabric samples the interior designer had left. Isla, Dad said, settling into one of the folding chairs I'd brought for contractor meetings. We've been struggling since I lost my job. Your mother's hours got cut. We thought maybe if the new owner was reasonable, we could work out some arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Rent the house back. Pay what we could afford until we get back on our feet. I looked at them, really looked at them. Dad, holding Monica's child because she was presumably too busy to watch her own daughter. Mom, sitting in my living room asking for charity from the daughter she'd thrown away. Where's Monica? She's at work, Mom said. She got promoted to regional manager last month. Congratulations to her. And who's watching Tyler and Emma? Well, we were, but with having to move out. Dad gestured helplessly. So Monica had gotten a promotion while my parents provided free childcare. The cycle continued, just with different people bearing the cost. And Monica's promotion came with a salary increase. It did, Mom said hopefully. That's why we thought maybe we could work something out. Monica could help with the rent. Could she? Has she offered? Uncomfortable silence. Or is she expecting you to figure out your own housing while continuing to provide free childcare for her kids? More silence. I walked to the window and looked out at the yard where I'd once pushed Monica's children on swings during countless unpaid babysitting sessions. Let me tell you what I'm going to do with this house, I said, turning back to face them. I'm turning it into a childcare center. Hey, what? Mom looked confused. A drop-in childcare facility for working mothers who need reliable, professional care for their children. mothers who will pay fair wages to qualified caregivers. But this is our family home. This was the house where I learned that my value was tied to my usefulness. I'm changing that. I'm making it a place where caring for children is respected and compensated appropriately. Dad shifted Sophie to his other hip. Isla, we're your parents. We raised you. You raised me to believe that my needs were less important than everyone else's convenience. I've spent the last 2 years unlearning that lesson. We made mistakes, Mom said quietly, but we're family. Family doesn't throw people away when they try to set boundaries. We want to make it right. Do you? Because I sent you a detailed invoice documenting 3 years of unpaid labor, and your response was to cut me off completely. That invoice was... Dad searched for words. It was hurtful. It was honest. You can't charge family for helping out. Why not? Monica charges her clients for professional services. You charged your employer for your time before you were laid off. But somehow my time, my expertise, my life, that was supposed to be free. They had no answer for that. Sophie, who had been playing quietly with the fabric samples, suddenly looked up at me with curious eyes. Are you my Aunt Isla? The question caught me off guard. Yes, sweetie, I am. Mommy said you went away. I did go away. Why? How do you explain family dysfunction to a 4-year-old? Sometimes grown-ups need to take care of themselves so they can be happier and healthier. Sophie nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. I think it's time for you to go, I said gently to my parents. Isla, please. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm also not the person who used to drop everything to solve your problems. That girl is gone. As they gathered themselves to leave, Mom turned back one more time. What are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, but figuring that out isn't my responsibility anymore. After they left, I sat in the empty living room surrounded by renovation plans and thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the girl who couldn't say no to the woman who just said no to her desperate parents. It should have felt victorious. Instead, it felt like closure. 6 months later, Little Steps Childcare Center opened its doors. The house had been transformed into a bright, welcoming space designed specifically for children's needs and caregivers' work. The living room where I'd once been invisible became a spacious play area filled with educational toys and books. The kitchen, where I'd prepared countless unpaid meals, now met commercial standards and allowed our staff to provide nutritious snacks. My old bedroom became an office where parents could discuss their children's needs with qualified professionals. We offered drop-in care for working mothers, flexible scheduling, and fair wages for our staff. No guilt trips, no exploitation. No expectation that love should come without compensation. The center filled up quickly. Word spread about our professional approach, our reasonable rates, and our respect for both families and employees. One afternoon, I was in my office reviewing enrollment applications when our receptionist knocked. Isla, there's someone here asking about enrollment. She seems familiar. I looked through the office window and saw Monica standing near the entrance, looking uncertain and older than when I'd last seen her. Send her back. Monica walked into my office, looking around with something that might have been awe. This place is incredible, Isla. Thank you. I've been hearing amazing things about Little Steps around town. Other mothers say you provide the most reliable, professional childcare in the area. I waited for her to continue. I was wondering, could I get an application for after-school care? For Tyler and Emma. The request was both surprising and predictable. Monica needed reliable childcare, and she'd heard I provided excellent services. The difference now was that she understood she'd have to pay for them. Our after-school program has a waiting list, but I can give you an application. Is there any way, given our history, could you maybe expedite the process? Even now, Monica was looking for special treatment based on our family relationship. Everyone on our waiting list is treated equally. But I'm your sister. You're a potential client. That's the only relationship that matters here. Monica looked around my office again, taking in the professional operation I'd built from the ashes of our family dysfunction. I owe you an apology, Isla. I waited. I didn't understand what we were asking of you. How much work it really was. How much of your life you were giving up. I get it now. What changed your perspective? Having to pay for professional childcare. Do you know what it costs to hire qualified people to do what you were doing for free? $19 an hour minimum. Monica's face flushed. Right, the rate you calculated in that invoice. The rate I researched based on industry standards for professional childcare services. We never paid it. I know. We couldn't afford to. I know that too. Which means you couldn't afford the services you were demanding from me. Monica was quiet for a moment. I'm starting to understand that maybe we should have found a way to afford it, or at least acknowledged what you were sacrificing. It was more honesty than I'd ever gotten from Monica before, but acknowledgement of harm doesn't automatically repair the damage. I appreciate you saying that. Is there any chance we could start over? Build some kind of relationship? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She seemed smaller somehow, less certain than the woman who used to call demanding immediate babysitting assistance. Monica, I'm not the same person who used to drop everything to help you. I can see that. I have boundaries now. I have my own life, my own priorities. I won't sacrifice my well-being for your convenience anymore. I understand. Do you? Because this conversation feels very familiar. You need something. You show up asking for special treatment because we're family. Monica looked stung but didn't argue. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am still thinking about our relationship in terms of what you can do for me. At least you're honest about it. So where do we go from here? You take the enrollment application. You join the waiting list like everyone else. You pay the same rates as every other parent. And maybe eventually we figure out how to be sisters instead of user and service provider. Monica left with an application and what appeared to be a lot to think about. I didn't hear from her for 2 months. When she did call, it wasn't about childcare. Isla, I wanted to let you know that Tyler made honor roll this quarter. It was such a simple thing, sharing good news about her child. But for us, it was revolutionary. Monica was contacting me to celebrate something positive, not to manage a crisis. That's wonderful. Tell him I'm proud of him. He asks about you sometimes, about whether he'll see you again. What do you tell him? That you're doing important work helping families, and that we hope to see you again soon. 6 months later, Monica did enroll Sophie in our preschool program. Not because she was desperate or expected special treatment, but because she genuinely believed in what we were doing. I want Sophie to learn that caring for others is valuable work, she told me during the enrollment meeting. I want her to see adults being appreciated for what they contribute. It was a far cry from the woman who had once expected unlimited free labor from her younger sister. Over time, our relationship slowly evolved. Not back to what it had been. That dynamic was irreparably broken, but into something healthier. We had occasional family dinners where Monica asked about my work and I asked about her life. She told me about her struggles as a single mother. She and Brad had separated, and her efforts to build better support systems. It's harder than I thought it would be, she admitted one evening as we watched Sophie play on the center's playground. Managing everything without assuming someone else will always be available to help. That's what it's like to be a real adult, I said. Taking responsibility for your choices and their consequences. I know, and I know I made your life harder by not learning that lesson sooner. 2 years after Little Steps opened, we expanded to a second location. The demand for professional, affordable childcare was enormous, and we'd proven that you could operate ethically while remaining profitable. I was featured in a local business magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year, praised for creating innovative solutions to community needs. The article mentioned my background in architecture, but didn't delve into the personal story behind Little Steps. Maya, who had become a family therapist specializing in boundary issues, often used my experience as an example in her work. "What I find most interesting about your story," she told me over dinner one evening, "is how you turned a personal injustice into a community solution." "I had help," I said, raising my glass to her. "I had a friend who helped me see that what I was experiencing wasn't normal or acceptable. All I did was listen. You did more than that. You showed me what healthy relationships look like: mutual support, respect for boundaries, appreciation for contributions." 3 years after buying back the house, I received a letter from my father, not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter delivered by mail. "Dear Isla," it began, "I've been thinking about our conversation when we came to see you about the house. You said something that stuck with me. When you treat people like labor instead of love, don't be surprised when they finally build something without you." The letter went on for 3 pages. Dad wrote about his struggles after losing his job, about watching Monica repeat the same patterns of exploitation that he and Mom had modeled, about finally understanding what they had taken from me. "I realize now that we taught you to measure your worth by your usefulness to others," he wrote. "That was wrong, and I'm sorry. You deserved better from your family." The letter concluded with an invitation to Sunday dinner. "No expectations," he wrote. "No requests for help. Just a chance to see you as our daughter rather than our solution to problems." I thought about the invitation for a week before responding. The girl who had been thrown out for saying no might have rushed back, desperate for any sign of acceptance. But the woman I'd become understood that reconciliation required more than apologies. It required sustained change in behavior. I started with small steps: a coffee date with my parents where we talked about my work, not their needs; a brief visit where Mom asked about my life without segueing into requests for help. Gradually, carefully, we began building a different kind of relationship. Monica's children grew up knowing me as Aunt Isla, who ran the child care center, not as the family member who was always available for emergency babysitting. Tyler, now in high school, sometimes volunteered at Little Steps as part of his community service requirement. Emma had announced her intention to study architecture, inspired by the buildings Aunt Isla designs for kids. Sophie, now 7, had no memory of the dysfunction that had characterized my relationship with her family. To her, I was simply the aunt who made sure children had safe, nurturing places to play while their parents worked. 5 years after sending that first invoice, I sat in my office at Little Steps reviewing our annual report. We now operated 4 locations, employed 127 people, and served over 2,000 families. Our advocacy work had influenced citywide policies on child care worker wages and professional development. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't the real measure of success. The real success was in the transformation, personal and cultural, that had grown from one young woman's decision to stop accepting exploitation disguised as love. Maya knocked on my office door, interrupting my reflections. "How's the annual report coming?" "Good. We've had an incredible year. Any regrets about the path that brought you here?" I thought about the question seriously. No regrets about standing up for myself. But I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if my family had been capable of healthy relationships from the beginning. You might never have developed the insight and determination that led to all this. Maya gestured around the thriving child care center. Maybe. Or maybe I would have found other ways to contribute to the world. True. But this way, you get to help other people avoid the same pain you experienced. She was right. Every parent who dropped their child off at Little Steps knowing they were paying fair wages for professional care, every caregiver who felt valued and respected in their work, every family that learned healthy boundaries through our educational programs, They all benefited from the lessons I'd learned the hard way. That evening, I drove past my parents' new apartment complex on my way home. It was smaller than the house they'd lost, but it suited their actual needs and budget. Dad had found work as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit. Mom had started volunteering at a literacy program. Most importantly, they'd learned to be grandparents rather than unpaid childcare providers. They saw Monica's children regularly, but on terms that worked for everyone. No one was being exploited for someone else's convenience. Monica had also found her footing as a truly independent adult. Her relationship with Brad had ended permanently, but she developed a network of reliable, paid childcare providers and had stopped expecting family members to sacrifice their lives for her convenience. The invoice I'd sent 5 years ago had been about $12,050, but it had become something much more valuable, a catalyst for transformation, a lesson in self-worth, a blueprint for building relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. As I pulled into my own driveway, a small house I'd bought near Little Steps, decorated entirely according to my own preferences, I reflected on the journey from invisible family servant to community leader. The girl who had been afraid to say no had become a woman who had built an entire organization around the principle that caring for others is valuable work, deserving of respect and fair compensation. Some people might say that sending your family an invoice for childcare services was vindictive. I prefer to think of it as educational. It taught them, and me, exactly what unconditional availability costs. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is show them what healthy boundaries look like, even if they don't appreciate the lesson at first. The invoice was never about the money. It was about recognition, respect, and the radical idea that love should enhance your life, not consume it. Every day, as I watched children thrive under the care of professionals who chose to be there and were valued for their work, I was reminded that the best revenge isn't making people pay for what they've done. The best revenge is building something so much better than what you lost that you transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone who comes after you. So yeah, I sent the invoice. And then I turned my childhood pain into other children's protection, my family's exploitation into a community's empowerment, and my experience of being undervalued into a system that ensures no one else has to accept love without respect. My parents never did pay that $12,000, but strangers thank me every day for the work I do, and that gratitude, freely given, genuinely felt, is worth every hour I ever gave away for free. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 7 years into Little Steps operation, while I was reviewing applications for our newest initiative, a pilot program training former foster youth in professional childcare skills. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but warm. Ms. Chin, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez from the National Center for Family Policy Research. I'm calling because we've been following your work with Little Steps, and we'd like to discuss a rather unique opportunity. I set down my coffee and gave her my full attention. I'm listening. We're developing a federal task force on family support systems and childcare accessibility. Your model, both the business approach and your personal experience with family exploitation, has caught the attention of some very influential people. Would you be interested in consulting on national policy? The conversation that followed changed everything. Within 6 months, I found myself testifying before Congress about the hidden costs of unpaid family labor and the economic benefits of professional childcare systems. The current crisis in American childcare, I told the packed hearing room, isn't just about supply and demand. It's about our fundamental failure to value the work of caring for children. When we expect this labor to be provided for free by family members, usually women, we create systems of exploitation that harm individuals and weaken communities. The committee chair, Representative Johnson, leaned forward. Can you elaborate on the economic impact of what you call family exploitation? Certainly. When a family member provides full-time childcare without compensation, that person is typically unable to pursue education, career advancement, or economic independence. The savings to the family comes at the cost of one person's future earning potential and economic security. I pulled out the chart I'd prepared, showing the long-term financial impact of unpaid caregiving on individuals and families. In my own case, 3 years of providing approximately 35 hours per week of unpaid childcare would have cost my family over $12,000 if they'd hired professionals. But it cost me far more than that. Delayed graduation, missed internship opportunities, stunted career development. The true economic impact was closer to $50,000 in lost earning potential. Representative Davis, a mother of 3, asked, "What solutions do you recommend?" First, we need to stop treating childcare as a luxury service and start recognizing it as essential infrastructure. Second, we need professional standards and fair wages for childcare workers. Third, we need family education about healthy boundaries and support systems. The hearing made national news. Suddenly, everyone wanted to interview the young woman who had invoiced her family for unpaid childcare and turned the experience into a successful advocacy platform. But with visibility came complications I hadn't expected. The first indication that my story had reached a wider audience came when Monica called, her voice tight with anxiety. "Isla, have you seen the comments on the news articles about your testimony?" I try not to read comment sections. Why? Some people are not happy about what you've said about our family. I pulled up the latest article and scrolled through the responses. The comments were predictably polarizing. This woman destroyed her family over money. Disgusting. Finally, someone speaking truth about how families exploit women's labor. She's just bitter and vindictive. Family helps family, period. This is exactly what happened to me. Thank you for speaking up. What kind of person charges their own parents for babysitting? The kind of person who refuses to be taken advantage of anymore. The debate raged across social media platforms, with strangers dissecting my family's dynamics and judging decisions they couldn't possibly understand. "I'm sorry this is affecting you too," I told Monica. "I know the attention isn't comfortable." Actually, that's not why I called. I called because some of the criticism is making me think about things differently. How so? Reading people defend what we did to you. It's helping me understand how wrong we were. These strangers are making the same arguments we made, that family should help family, that you were being selfish, that you should have been grateful for a place to live. Monica paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully, seeing our justifications come out of other people's mouths. It's horrifying. We really did convince ourselves that exploiting you was normal and acceptable. It took me years to understand that too. It's hard to see dysfunction when you're living inside it. The thing is, some of the comments defending you, they're from people sharing their own stories, people who had similar experiences in their families. She was right. Mixed in with the criticism were dozens of testimonials from people who had been parentified, exploited, or dismissed by their own families. Young women who had sacrificed their education to care for siblings. Adults' children who had provided unpaid elder care while their siblings pursued careers. Foster children who had been expected to earn their keep through household labor. "I'm starting to realize," Monica continued, "that what we did to you wasn't unique. It's a pattern that happens in a lot of families. That's exactly why the policy work matters. Individual solutions aren't enough. We need systemic change." The national attention led to speaking engagements across the country. I found myself addressing audiences of social workers, policymakers, family therapists, and advocates. Each presentation reinforced the same message. Caring for others is valuable work that deserves respect and compensation, whether it's provided by professionals or family members. But the most meaningful conversations happened during the Q&A sessions, when audience members shared their own experiences. After a presentation in Denver, a young man approached the podium. Ms. Chin, I wanted to thank you for telling your story. I've been taking care of my younger siblings since I was 14 because my mom works 3 jobs. I never thought about it as work before. I just thought it was what I was supposed to do. How old are you now? 22. I'm trying to finish college, but it's hard when I'm still responsible for getting my brothers to school and helping with homework. Have you ever talked to your family about getting additional support? Every time I bring it up, my mom says we can't afford daycare or after-school programs. She makes me feel guilty for even asking. It was my story all over again. A young person sacrificing their future because a family couldn't or wouldn't develop sustainable support systems. You're not responsible for solving your mother's childcare needs, I told him. You can love your brothers without sacrificing your education for them. But what if my mom can't handle everything without my help? Then she'll have to find other solutions. Community resources, extended family, assistance programs. Making yourself indispensable doesn't actually help your family. It just prevents them from developing the skills and systems they need to function independently. Similar conversations happened after every presentation. Adults who had been parentified as children, young people currently trapped in exploitative family dynamics, parents who were unconsciously repeating patterns from their own childhoods. The need for education and support was enormous. That realization led to the next expansion of Little Steps, the Family Boundary Institute. We began offering workshops, support groups, and educational resources for families struggling with unhealthy dynamics. Our most popular program was Recognizing and Changing Exploitative Family Patterns, which covered topics like emotional manipulation, guilt-based control, parentification, and the difference between healthy interdependence and codependency. How do you know when helping family has become harmful? I asked a group of participants during one workshop. A middle-aged woman raised her hand. When it never ends. When there's always another crisis that only you can solve. That's a good sign. What else? When you're afraid to say no because of how people will react, offered a younger man. When your own needs always come last, added another participant. All excellent answers. Here's another one. When the relationship feels one-sided. When you're always giving and they're always taking. When your value to the family is tied to your usefulness rather than your inherent worth as a person. These workshops became some of the most rewarding work I did. Watching people develop the language to describe their experiences and the tools to change unhealthy patterns gave me hope that future generations might avoid some of the pain I'd experienced. One particularly powerful session included a mother and her teenage daughter who were working to repair their relationship after years of the daughter being expected to care for younger siblings. I didn't realize what I was doing to Sarah, the mother, Jennifer, admitted during a group discussion. I thought I was teaching her responsibility and family values. Sarah, 17 and visibly angry, responded, "You were teaching me that my life didn't matter as much as everyone else's convenience. I needed help. I was overwhelmed. So get professional help. Don't make your teenager into an unpaid nanny." The conversation was difficult, but necessary. Jennifer was beginning to understand how her expectations had harmed her daughter, while Sarah was learning to express her needs without guilt or fear. What would healthy family support look like for your situation? I asked them. Jennifer thought for a moment. Maybe asking Sarah if she's available to help instead of assuming she is? Paying her for her time? Making sure she has time for her own activities? And what would you need to feel respected in the family? I asked Sarah, I want my mom to see me as a person, not just as free labor. I want to help sometimes, but I also want to have my own life. 6 months later, Jennifer sent me an update. She had enrolled her younger children in after-school care, hired a babysitter for date nights, and started paying Sarah a fair rate for occasional babysitting. More importantly, she had stopped making assumptions about Sarah's availability and started asking about her daughter's life and interests. The relationship isn't perfect, she wrote, but it's honest. And Sarah seems happier and more willing to help when she knows her contributions are valued rather than expected. These success stories reinforced my conviction that family dysfunction wasn't inevitable. It was a pattern that could be recognized and changed with the right tools and support. As Little Steps approached its 10th anniversary, we had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. For child care centers, a family education institute, a policy advocacy program, and a consulting practice that worked with organizations across the country. But the growth also brought challenges. Managing such a large operation required skills I was still developing, and the constant travel for speaking engagements was exhausting. Maya, who had become my business partner as well as my closest friend, suggested I consider stepping back from some responsibilities. "You've proven your point," she said during one of our monthly planning meetings. "You've built something incredible, influenced policy, changed countless lives. Maybe it's time to focus on the work that brings you the most joy." Which work is that? The direct service, the one-on-one interactions with families, the workshops where you see people have breakthrough moments. She was right. While I valued the policy work and appreciated the platform it gave me, my favorite moments were still the small, personal interactions, helping a parent understand their child's needs, watching a caregiver develop confidence in their skills, facilitating a conversation that helped a family heal. I decided to restructure my role, focusing more on program development and less on administrative tasks. We hired an executive director to handle day-to-day operations while I concentrated on the work that had started it all, helping families develop healthier, more respectful relationships. One of my last major speaking engagements was a national conference on family therapy, where I was invited to give the keynote address on transforming family trauma into community healing. 10 years ago, I told the audience of therapists and social workers, I sent my family an invoice for 3 years of unpaid childcare. Some people saw it as vindictive. I saw it as educational. It forced all of us to confront the true cost of family exploitation. I clicked to the next slide, showing a photo of Little Step's newest location. But the real education happened afterward, as we learned to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than assumed obligation. As my sister learned to value the work of caring for children, as my parents learned to support their adult children without exploiting them, as I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary for authentic love. The presentation concluded with a call to action for the therapists in the audience. Your clients don't need to choose between family relationships and personal well-being. They need help developing the skills to maintain both. They need language to describe their experiences and tools to change unhealthy patterns. They need permission to value themselves as much as they value others. During the Q&A, a therapist asked, "What would you say to someone who's currently in a situation similar to what you experienced? Someone who feels trapped between family loyalty and personal survival?" I thought about all the young people who had approached me over the years, all the workshop participants who had shared their stories, all the comments and emails from strangers who had seen themselves in my experience. I would say that real love wants you to thrive, even when it's inconvenient. Real love celebrates your boundaries instead of testing them. And real love never makes you choose between being valued and being useful. I paused, thinking about the journey from that first invoice to this moment. Most importantly, I would say that you have permission to save yourself. You don't need anyone's approval to set boundaries, pursue your goals, or build a life that reflects your worth. Your value isn't tied to your usefulness to others. The audience gave me a standing ovation, but the real reward came afterward when dozens of therapists approached to share how they planned to incorporate these ideas into their practice. On the flight home, I reflected on the unexpected path that had brought me here. The scared young woman who had been thrown out for saying no had become someone who helped others find their voices. The family scapegoat had become a community leader. The girl who had been afraid to set boundaries had built an organization dedicated to teaching healthy relationship skills. The invoice I'd sent 10 years ago had been about $12,548.50, but it had become something invaluable, a catalyst for transformation, a lesson in self-worth, a blueprint for building relationships based on love rather than exploitation. Every day brought new reminders that the work mattered. Former participants in our workshops who had successfully navigated family boundary conversations. Parents who had learned to appreciate and compensate family members who helped with childcare. Young adults who had broken cycles of parentification and exploitation. And sometimes the most meaningful acknowledgments came from unexpected sources. Last month, I received a letter from Tyler, Monica's oldest son, now a college sophomore studying social work. "Dear Aunt Isla," he wrote, "I'm taking a class on family systems and we're learning about parentification and family roles. When the professor described children who are forced to take on adult responsibilities, I immediately thought about what happened between you and Mom when I was little." The letter continued for 3 pages, with Tyler describing his memories of that time and his current understanding of the family dynamics. "I remember being confused when you suddenly weren't around anymore," he wrote. "Mom said you had chosen your career over family, but even as a kid, that didn't make sense to me. You had always been so good with us, so patient and caring." He went on to describe how the family had changed after I'd left. Mom had to figure out how to manage everything herself, and at first she was really overwhelmed. But gradually she got better at it. She started asking Dad to help more, found reliable babysitters, developed routines that didn't depend on someone else always being available. The most powerful part of the letter came near the end. "I think what you did, leaving when they wouldn't respect your boundaries, taught all of us important lessons about relationships. Mom learned that she couldn't take people for granted. Dad learned that helping the family didn't mean one person should sacrifice everything. And I learned that love should make people feel valued, not used." Tyler concluded by thanking me for the example I'd set and expressing his intention to work with families professionally. "I want to help other families learn what ours learned the hard way, that healthy relationships require mutual respect and that caring for others doesn't mean sacrificing yourself." Reading his letter, I realized that the transformation I'd hoped for had indeed happened, but in ways I never could have predicted. The painful confrontation that had fractured our family had ultimately taught us all how to love each other better. The invoice that had started as a cry for recognition had become a multi-generational lesson in respect, boundaries, and the true meaning of family support. That evening, I called Monica to thank her for raising such a thoughtful son. "Tyler's letter was beautiful," I said. "You should be proud of the young man he's become." "I am proud. And Isla, I'm proud of you too, for having the courage to demand better from us, even when it cost you everything." It didn't cost me everything. It cost me the illusion of family love that was conditional on my usefulness. What I gained was much more valuable. What did you gain? Self-respect, authentic relationships, the knowledge that I matter as a person, not just as a resource, and the ability to help other people learn those same lessons. As we ended the call, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this point. From exploitation to education, from family dysfunction to community healing, from a desperate invoice to a national platform for change. The girl who had been afraid to say no had become a woman who had taught thousands of people that their voices mattered. The family scapegoat had become someone who helped other families heal their wounds before they became scars. And every day, as I watched children thrive under the care of adults who chose to be there and were valued for their work, I was reminded that sometimes the most personal pain can become the foundation for the most meaningful change. The invoice was never about the money. It was about recognition, respect, and the radical idea that everyone, even family members, deserves to be treated with dignity. 10 years later, that idea had grown into something larger than I ever imagined. a movement, a methodology, and a message that continues to transform lives. My parents never did pay that $12,000, but the return on investment in changed lives, healed families, and transformed communities has been immeasurable. And that transformation, that's worth every hour I ever gave away for free and every difficult moment of the journey that followed. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.